You know that feeling, that sort of low hum of dissatisfaction. Maybe you're scrolling through the same feeds, going through the motions,
Yeah.
and then you're lying awake at night and there's that knot in your stomach.
Hmm.
That sense that the day, or maybe even like the last few years, just felt wasted.
Right, like you're stuck.
Exactly. Stuck in a loop, same routine, and, deep down something needs to change. But, well, you feel kind of powerless.
It's that really profound sense of unfulfillment, isn't it? Knowing you're not living up to something inside, but somehow you're just fixed, maybe hoping change will just sort of show up.
Right, hoping it'll just happen. And that feeling, that's really the jumping off point for the perspective we're digging into today. We've been looking at material that gives this raw, almost confrontational view on personal change.
It really is. It doesn't really buy into the idea that change is gentle or, arrives like some miracle.
Definitely not. This stuff is pretty intense. It basically argues change isn't something you wait for. It's something you have to actively take.
Yeah. Seize it. Our mission here is really to unpack this challenging perspective, try to understand why it insists on this, intensity, and see what insights we can actually pull from it about taking control.
It certainly doesn't pull any punches. It starts by saying, okay, that feeling of being stuck, it's real. You know you've wasted nights. The routine feels empty. Something is fundamentally wrong.
Yes, and it immediately points to the resistance. You feel it, you know it, but instead of facing that truth, you put it off. The source highlights that self-deception, I'll start tomorrow, or it's just not the right time.
Right, that endless deferral, pushing it off indefinitely, and suddenly it's weeks, months, years, and you're still just waiting.
And waiting. Well, that's the core problem according to this view, which brings us to the central, pretty provocative idea. Change isn't gentle. It calls it an assault.
An assault. Wow, that's a strong metaphor. It sounds like something you have to initiate forcefully.
Yeah, like there's no middle ground. You either take it, you seize control, or it just never happens. The alternative is staying passive.
Which this perspective says is really just hiding, right?
Yeah.
Behind excuses, distraction.
Exactly. And that keeps you locked right where you are.
Okay, so if waiting is out and change is this assault you have to mount, how do you even start that? It mentions a method described as brutally simple.
And it is, on the surface, a notebook, a pen, and the quiet of the early hours. That's it. That's your toolkit.
And the action, writing, but specifically about what you think you're doing wrong. And the key is no filters, no sweeteners, no excuses.
Right. Just raw, unvarnished.
So why? Why this potentially painful exercise?
Well, the argument is blunt. You don't change because you don't dare to look. You actively avoid that mirror because you're afraid of what you might see.
It ties us into deeper ideas too, doesn't it? Like Nietzsche, become who you are.
Yeah, but interpreted differently. Not easy self-acceptance. It means you first have to discover who you actually are right now. That's not always, pleasant.
And that discovery, it says, doesn't come from motivational quotes.
No. It comes from what it calls surgical brutality. Like precisely dissecting the mistakes, the fears, the excuses that got you here.
It also echoes that idea. You sometimes find it in existential stuff, that suffering can be a tool for self-knowledge.
Exactly. And this perspective suggests you've been running from that discomfort, burying it under distractions, entertainment, hoping it just fades.
Which, it states very clearly, it won't. Problems don't just disappear if you ignore them.
No. Change only starts, it argues, when you rip off the blinders and look, even if what you see feels like a disaster.
And that word disaster is interesting because it follows up, right?
Yes. Disasters can be rebuilt. They're not the end. They're starting points.
Okay, so this leads into a really powerful analogy it uses, comparing your life to, like, a film script.
Yeah, the Tarantino analogy.
Yeah.
He doesn't just accept a story, he obsesses over writing his story.
Yeah.
And the point is, your life isn't set in stone either. You can grab the pen.
Rewrite the plot. Become the protagonist, not just an extra reacting to things.
Exactly. But rewriting, especially your life, has a price.
And that price, according to this, is the truth.
Facing your reality. No softening the hard parts. No pretending away the mistakes.
So it challenges you directly. What story are you writing right now? Is it really yours? Or one imposed by, expectations or just inertia?
Yeah. And the difference between those who change and those who stay stuck, it comes down to facing yourself with that same raw honesty. No masks.
Okay, so the specific call to action here isn't for someday. It's very pointedly for tonight.
Yes, tonight, when it's quiet. Get the notebook, get the pen.
And the instruction is pretty stark. Write down everything you feel you're doing wrong. Choices, fears, excuses. Write until it hurts, and when it hurts, keep writing.
That embracing of discomfort is key. And then, after that raw honesty, the next step is finding solutions.
And this seems important without justifying or saying how hard it is.
Right. Acknowledge it isn't easy. That's why most people don't do it. But don't use the difficulty as another excuse.
And maybe the relief here is you don't have to solve everything tonight.
No, not at all. The goal is just one concrete decision, one small actionable thing for tomorrow morning, just to start shifting course.
This really tackles that tendency to wait until you feel ready.
Absolutely. It argues pretty forcefully, if you wait until you feel ready or until the fear goes away, you'll just never start, ever.
So the only way to deal with fear in this view is to move despite it.
Yes. Action kills the fear, not waiting. And the only way to change your story is to actually pick up the pen and start rewriting.
It makes a strong point that inaction isn't neutral, is it?
No, it's an active decision. Every moment you delay, you're choosing to stay put.
And the scary part raises is if you don't write your story, something else will. Expectations, pressure, routine.
It uses that unsettling analogy of becoming filler characters in our own lives.
Yeah.
People trapped in lives they hate because somewhere along the line, they decided it was just easier not to decide. And they tell themselves, this is just life.
Which this source calls the lie of those who've given up authorship.
Exactly. And it stresses there isn't just one script. There are hundreds of versions waiting, depending on the choices you make now.
So when people resist this kind of honest look, saying, I don't have time or energy or clarity,
The source argues that's mostly noise. The real block isn't lack of answers, it's lack of courage. Courage to face what you probably already know you'll find.
the problem isn't not knowing, it's knowing and not liking the answers.
Precisely. Accepting you're the architect of your own misery, to use a harsh phrase it might imply. That's painful. Because it means you could have done things differently.
But that pain, it's framed as the way out.
The only exit door from stagnation. Looking at the pain, understanding it, that's what gives you the power to change the actions causing it.
And instead of numbing it with distractions, believing time will just fix it.
Right. And the warning is stark. Time doesn't heal inaction. Unused time becomes a graveyard for all those potential versions of you.
Which brings us back to the setting it recommends for this confrontation. Silence. Solitude. Especially at night.
Yeah, why not? Because the world finally shuts up, right? No emails, no demands, just you.
And your thoughts.
And if you fear that silence, it's probably because you know they're difficult things.
Yeah.
Monsters, he calls them, you've been avoiding during the day.
It frames the night as your personal editing room.
I like that, yeah. Time to identify and cut scenes, parts of your life, habits, maybe relationships that don't serve the story you want.
You don't have to edit the whole film tonight.
But you have to start. Make the first cut.
And a really key point here, maybe different from a lot of advice, is that it's not just about adding good habits.
No, it's about stopping the wrong things first. That takes courage.
Back to the editing analogy. Cut the bad scenes before you shoot new ones.
Makes sense. So what needs cutting? Maybe relationships that drain you? Habits that are clearly destructive. Those recurring negative thoughts.
You identify them and then decide to eliminate them from the story.
Yeah. And it's clear, this isn't magic. Writing it down is just facing it. The change starts when you decide to turn that honesty into an action plan. Even one night of that raw self-assessment shifts something inside.
Which leads back to the urgency. There's no perfect time, no safety net, just tonight, this decision now.
Right. And the fear it touches on isn't just failure, it's running out of time. Waking up years later realizing the script went wrong, subtly because you kept delaying.
Becoming the person you swore you wouldn't.
Exactly. Through small non-decisions. So the call is, decide NOW before the world steals more time.
And the harsh truth it delivers. But maybe it's liberating too.
Yeah, that no one's coming to save you. No mentor, no magic bullet.
Because if you are the problem, your resistance, your choices.
Then you are also the solution. The only one.
Which is a stark contrast to just living on autopilot. Complaining but doing nothing.
And this perspective says you just can't afford that if you feel you're meant for more.
So the final difference maker, it's acting before you feel ready.
That's it. Don't wait for motivation. Don't wait for fear to disappear. It argues fear disappears along the way through action.
Wow. Okay, this deep dive really gave us an unfiltered perspective, didn't it? No sugarcoating. Just brutal honesty, silence, and immediate uncomfortable action to start rewriting your story.
Yeah. And if that thought of waking up tomorrow to the same routine, same excuses,
Hmm.
if that makes your stomach turn, as it suggests it might,
Then you have your answer.
exactly. Waiting just isn't an option anymore if you truly want things to change.
So consider those two paths this perspective highlights. Being the author or letting inertia or others write your story. It's a challenging thought, but which path are you choosing? Starting tonight.